Imagine waking up each morning to find something in your own yard mysteriously out of place. Your property tampered with. Your peace of mind chipped away one petty act at a time. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, until the pattern became impossible to ignore. What started as a simple disagreement spiraled into a campaign of control, fueled by the very people who claimed to protect the neighborhood. But when their harassment went too far, I decided to fight back, and what happened next shocked everyone. When my family and I moved into the neighborhood, we thought we had finally found peace. The street curved gently into a cul-de-sac, lined with neatly trimmed lawns, pastel shutters, and the occasional mailbox decorated with flowers. It looked like something out of a real estate magazine, safe, quiet, and predictable. Exactly what we wanted after years of renting cramped apartments. For the first few weeks, life felt almost too perfect. Our kids rode their bikes on the sidewalks. Neighbors waved when we walked the dog, and the air smelled of freshly cut grass on Saturday mornings. The kind of place where you'd assume everyone minded their own business. But in communities like this, perfection is never accidental. It's policed. At first, the HOA was just a name on the welcome packet we received. A thick folder of rules, guidelines, and warnings tucked inside a glossy brochure that proudly declared, "Maintaining property values for everyone." I skimmed through it once, set it on the counter, and thought little of it. After all, how much could they really care about something as small as the color of your shutters or where you put your trash can on collection day? It didn't take long to realize that the HOA wasn't just about keeping the grass short or the mailboxes uniform. It was about control. Subtle at first, an email reminding residents to keep holiday decorations seasonally appropriate, or a posted notice about cars parked too long on the street. Tiny, harmless-seeming rules presented as if they were for the good of everyone. But there was always a tone to it, a sharpness hiding behind the polite language, as if every reminder wasn't a suggestion, it was a warning. And behind those warnings were people who took pride in enforcing them. We learned that quickly after our first friendly notice. A thin slip of paper folded under our door, reminding us that our trash cans must be stored out of sight. Within 1 hour of pickup, we had left ours out a little too long that week. An oversight, a simple mistake, but the wording was cold, almost accusatory, as if we had committed some crime against the entire neighborhood. I remember reading it twice, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't just the message, it was the implication. Someone had been watching. Someone had taken the time to report us, to document it, and to send a notice. In that moment, the shiny surface of the neighborhood cracked just slightly, and I realized there were eyes everywhere. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a formality. Maybe this was how things worked here, and we'd just need to adjust. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Because in neighborhoods like ours, the smallest slip could make you a target. And once the HOA sets its sights on you, life could quickly turn into a battle you never signed up for. At first, I thought the trash can notice would be the end of it. A warning, a reminder to follow the rules, and life would go back to normal. But in HOA neighborhoods, nothing is ever that simple. That slip of paper was only the beginning of a slow, grinding campaign, one that turned daily life into a careful dance, as if every move outside my own front door was being watched, judged, and recorded. The second notice came only a week later. This time, it was about our lawn. According to the HOA, the grass was uneven in height and needed to be cut immediately to maintain community aesthetics. What they didn't bother to mention was that it had rained for 3 days straight and no lawn service was operating in the downpour. I laughed when I first read it, but the laughter faded quickly. because beneath the ridiculousness of the complaint was a threat: fix it or face a fine. We complied, of course. I hired a landscaper, and the next morning the grass looked like something out of a golf course commercial. But the relief of fixing the problem didn't last, because once they know you'll bend, they push harder. Soon, the violations piled up like clockwork. A faded garden hose is visible on the side of the house. A child's bicycle was left leaning against the garage for more than a few hours. A seasonal wreath on the door that did not meet approved decoration guidelines. Each one came in the same sterile envelope, tucked neatly under our doormat like a calling card. Each one carried the same undertone: we're watching. You don't belong unless you obey. At first, we tried to ignore it. We told ourselves that maybe everyone was receiving these notices. Maybe it wasn't personal. But that illusion shattered. The day I saw my neighbor Mark mowing his front yard barefoot with his dog tied to the mailbox. No one sent him a notice. He laughed when I asked if he'd ever been fined for anything. Never, he said, like it was unthinkable. That's when I realized it wasn't about the rules. It was about us. The fines started small, $25 here, $50 there. Annoying, but manageable. Then they grew bolder. A $150 fine for unsightly storage when our kids left their soccer net in the side yard. A $200 charge for a supposed pest. Issue: after someone claimed they saw weeds creeping along the fence line. Each fine carried a deadline, and the language became sharper, threatening liens on our property if unpaid. The money wasn't even the worst part. It was the humiliation of knowing someone, some neighbor, was reporting us over and over, feeding the HOA ammunition to use against us. The tension began to eat away at daily life. My kids hesitated to leave toys in the yard. My spouse refused to park in the driveway for fear of another violation. Even I caught myself looking over my shoulder. Every time I walked outside, scanning windows, wondering which one hid the eyes behind the curtain. The place we had chosen for peace had become a prison with invisible bars. Then came the breaking point. One morning, as I was leaving for work, I noticed our trash can had been tipped over and garbage strewn across the street. At first, I assumed it was raccoons or maybe the wind, but it kept happening. Week after week, every collection day, our trash would be scattered, always in front of our property. No one else's cans were touched, only ours. I cleaned it up quietly the first few times, trying not to make a scene. But on the 5th week, I caught a glimpse of her. A woman in her 60s, perfectly styled hair, sunglasses even on a cloudy day, walking away from my can with that telltale shove. The HOA president, the same person whose signature appeared at the bottom of every notice, every fine, every threat. I stood frozen, gripping my car keys, rage boiling in my chest. She didn't even glance back. To her, it was nothing, just another way to remind me that I was under her thumb. That moment changed everything, because once you know the face behind the curtain, the game becomes personal. The next day, another letter arrived, this time accusing us of creating a nuisance by failing to maintain proper waste disposal. The audacity nearly made me laugh. They were fining me for the mess she herself had created. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding or overzealous enforcement. This was deliberate and targeted harassment, and if I didn't do something, it would never stop. I started documenting everything. Photos of the trash can, before collection, proof of its placement, and timestamps of when the garbage truck came. I installed a small camera above the garage, angled perfectly toward the curb. Within a week, I had all the evidence I needed. Clear video of her approaching, glancing around, and deliberately toppling the bin. She moved quickly as if it were routine, like she'd done it dozens of times before. When I showed my spouse the footage, we sat in stunned silence. Proof. Irrefutable proof. And yet, we knew exposing her wouldn't be easy. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the head of the HOA, with allies on the board and influence over the very people who judged these disputes. Going against her meant going against the system. Still, I couldn't let it go. Every time I replayed the video, every time I remembered the smug way she walked away from the overturned can, my resolve hardened. She thought she was untouchable. She thought no one would dare call her out. But she underestimated one thing: how far a determined homeowner is willing to go when pushed to the edge. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following month, a routine gathering where residents showed up to nod along as rules were read and budgets were approved. But for me, it became a countdown. Every day leading up to it, I imagined the moment I'd stand in front of that room, camera in hand, and reveal exactly who had been causing the chaos. But nothing in this neighborhood was simple. Word began to spread, whispers from other residents, that they'd received strange fines too, often for things that didn't make sense. A couple down the street was fined for improper window coverings. A retiree was accused of yard neglect, despite having immaculate flower beds. The more I listened, the clearer it became. I wasn't alone. She had been targeting people selectively, using the rules as weapons to keep control. The knowledge gave me strength, but it also raised the stakes. If I exposed her, she wouldn't just come after me harder, she'd lose her grip on the entire neighborhood. And someone like her, someone who thrived on control, she wouldn't go down quietly. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. My nerves were raw, torn between excitement and dread. What if the board dismissed my evidence? What if they turned the blame back on me? What if she retaliated in ways I hadn't even imagined? The questions spiraled, but one thought anchored me. If I didn't speak up, nothing would ever change. When the day finally arrived, the room was packed. More residents than usual, drawn by the growing discontent that buzzed quietly beneath the surface of our perfect community. She sat at the front table, poised and smiling, as if she hadn't spent months tormenting the very people in the room. And as I sat there waiting for my moment to speak, clutching the footage that could shatter her carefully built facade, I realized, whatever happened next, there was no going back. The night of the HOA meeting felt like walking into enemy territory. The clubhouse was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it, neighbors crowding into the folding chairs, whispering in hushed tones. Normally, these meetings dragged on in silence, residents barely glancing up from their phones. But tonight was different. Tonight, the air was charged, tense, as if everyone knew something was about to happen. She sat at the front of the room, perfectly composed, flanked by her fellow board members. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were sharp, darting across the room like a hawk, surveying its prey. Every nod, every hand gesture carried the authority she'd built over years of intimidation. She ran this neighborhood like her own little kingdom, and she knew it. The meeting began the way it always did. Tedious announcements, budget reports, and a review of ongoing compliance issues. She read them with practiced authority, barely glancing at the papers in front of her. When she got to my name, I felt the weight of the room shift. "Lot 47, she said, her voice smooth but dripping with contempt. "Multiple violations remain, unresolved, improper waste storage, failure to maintain lawn standards, nuisance reports." She looked up then, locking eyes with me. "If these continue, the board will be forced to pursue a lien on the property." "That is the process," a few people muttered. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, the heat rising in my chest. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I stood slowly, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of what I was about to do. "With all due respect," I said, my voice steady though my heart was racing, "those violations weren't accidents. They were manufactured." A ripple went through the room. She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Manufactured? Are you suggesting the board is falsifying reports?" "Not the board," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I had spent hours preparing, trimming the footage, making it undeniable. I turned the screen toward the crowd. "I'm suggesting you manufactured them," I pressed. "Play." On the screen, the grainy black and white footage appeared. The camera angle was clear. The curb in front of my house, my trash can upright and waiting for collection. Then, the unmistakable figure of the HOA president herself striding across the frame. She glanced around, looked directly into the camera without realizing it, and with one swift push, toppled the can. Garbage spilled across the street. And then, just like that, she walked away. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, even laughter. I replayed it again, letting it loop so no one could claim it was a trick. Every detail was there. Her clothes, her posture, her unmistakable face. She shot up from her chair, her composure cracking. "This is absurd! That footage is taken out of context! You have no right!" But I cut her off. My voice was louder now, carried by months of pent-up frustration. "No context changes what we all just saw. You harassed my family. You overturned our trash week after week, and then fined us for the mess you created. You abused your position to target us, and I'm done staying silent." The murmurs swelled into open outrage. Neighbors began shouting from their seats. "She did the same to us." I knew those fines were bogus. "You've gone too far." Voices overlapped, the room transforming from order to chaos. For the first time, her smile was gone. She fumbled for words, insisting it was a misunderstanding, that the video was doctored, that this was an attack against the HOA itself. But no one was buying it. The spell she had held over the neighborhood for years was breaking right before her eyes. And then, like a match to dry kindling, it ignited. One by one, neighbors began speaking up. The couple was fined for their flower beds. The retiree is accused of yard neglect. A young mother was charged with leaving chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Story after story poured out, each one painting the same picture, a pattern of targeted harassment, rules twisted into weapons, power abused without consequence. Her face grew redder with each accusation. She slammed her hand on the table, demanding order, threatening legal action against anyone who slandered her. But the room had turned. The more she shouted, the more desperate she appeared. And the more desperate she appeared, the less anyone feared her. Finally, one of the board members, a man who had always sat silently at her side, stood up. His voice was shaky but firm. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "I've seen her falsify reports. I've seen her target families she didn't like. She told us it was for the good of the community, but it wasn't. It was personal." The room exploded. Cheers, clapping, the kind of collective release that comes when people finally see justice within reach. I stood there, almost overwhelmed by it all, the months of frustration boiling into a single wave of vindication. She tried to regain control, but it was too late. The board called for an emergency vote of no confidence. The ballots were collected. Right then and there, neighbors scribbling furiously, some of them smiling for the first time in months. The tally wasn't even close. She was removed as president on the spot. The look on her face was something I'll never forget. A mixture of shock, rage, and disbelief, as if she couldn't fathom that her kingdom had crumbled in a single night. She stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. But even as the cheering subsided, Even as neighbors patted me on the back and thanked me for standing up, a part of me knew this wasn't the end. People like her don't disappear quietly. They linger, waiting for a chance to strike back, to claw their way into power again. And as I walked home that night, the cool air finally washing over me, I couldn't shake one thought. I may have won the battle, but the war with her might not be over. The night after the meeting, I barely slept. My body felt wired, caught between the adrenaline rush of victory and the uneasy knowledge that the woman who had caused us months of torment was still just a few doors down. She might have lost her title, but people like her rarely accept defeat quietly. The following morning, our street was buzzing. Neighbors who used to nod politely now stopped to chat, their words heavy with relief. "You did what we couldn't. Thank you for standing up to her. I can't tell you how long we've wanted this." It was as if an invisible wall had come down. For the first time since moving in, the neighborhood actually felt like a community, not a prison. But underneath the gratitude, there was also fear. People whispered that she would fight back. Some said she had friends on the county zoning board. Others warned she'd try to sue for defamation or slander. I didn't dismiss those fears. After all, she had built her life around controlling people. Losing that power had to feel like death to her. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. Notices stopped arriving. No more envelopes under our doormat. No more reminders tucked in mailboxes. The board, now under interim leadership, promised reforms, clearer rules, fair enforcement, and transparency about fines. For once, it felt like real change might happen, but silence from her didn't mean she was gone. I saw her once a few days after the vote. She was in her yard, pruning roses with mechanical precision, her lips pressed thin, her eyes narrowing. When she noticed me watching, there was no greeting, no wave, just that look, a reminder that battles leave scars and hers hadn't healed. Then came the letter. Not from the HOA this time, but from her lawyer. A thick packet delivered straight to our mailbox, claiming that I had defamed her, that the video I presented was manipulated, and that I had caused her irreparable harm. She demanded damages, a public apology, and, ironically, the removal of my family from the neighborhood. For a moment, the air went out of me. After everything, after all the evidence, she was still reaching for any weapon she could find. But here's the thing. I wasn't the same homeowner she had bullied months ago. I had documentation, community support, and, most importantly, the truth. I took the packet straight to my attorney, who barely needed an hour to draft a response. We sent her a letter back, a warning that if she pursued her lawsuit, we would counterclaim for harassment, abuse of power, and damages caused by her falsified HOA enforcement. That was the last I ever heard from her legal team. She wanted control, not exposure, and she knew a public trial would shine light on everything she'd done. The neighborhood began to heal in ways I hadn't expected. Without her constant shadow, families felt free to breathe again. Children's toys stayed on lawns without the threat of fines. Holiday decorations bloomed in colors and styles the HOA had once outlawed. For the first time, the street looked alive, imperfect, human. It wasn't just about us anymore. Her downfall had triggered a ripple effect, giving others the courage to speak up. At the next meeting, residents demanded reforms, caps on fines, mediation before penalties, and term limits for board members. We voted, we debated, and for once, it felt like the HOA was serving the people, not ruling over them. As for her, she became a ghost. Occasionally, I'd catch sight of her walking her dog, head held high, but without the same authority in her stride. Her power had been broken. Neighbors who once cowered now turned away, offering cold stares instead of compliance. Her kingdom had crumbled, and though she stayed in the house, she no longer ruled the neighborhood. Looking back, I realize it wasn't just about trash cans or lawn heights or petty fines. It was about dignity, about refusing to let someone strip away your sense of belonging, your right to peace in your own home. That's what she tried to take from us, and that's what we fought to reclaim. To this day, the trash can sit proudly at the curb on pickup mornings, upright and untouched. And every time I roll it out, I feel that small but powerful reminder. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to shine a light on them, no matter how much they threaten or how untouchable they seem. Because in the end, communities aren't meant to be ruled. They're meant to be lived in. And no HOA, no neighbor, no self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac can take that away. So when you hear stories about power-hungry neighbors, about HOAs that push too far, ask yourself this: how much would you tolerate before you finally push back?